Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the ultimate blueprint to self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, a life coach to women, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. When hard times occur, do you make sound decisions and bounce back quickly? Most people struggle with doing so because they're missing one fundamental daily practice that will help them thrive when life ushers a storm in. So what is it? It's the practice of daily resilience building. This week, we're taking a one-on-one deep dive into what resiliency is, how we can mindfully create a practice that helps us not only elevate our thinking and emotional stability, but also helps us when we experience massive, unexpected changes, like an ending of a relationship, the loss of a job, or even the death of a loved one. Resiliency is more than bouncing back. It's a life skill that is built daily, and it's a skill that helps us reach self-love. Today, I'm walking you through exactly how to build it, and I'm going to hand over a practice that is so simple, you can start using it today. So let's dive right in. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. My friends, it's time to raise our hands again. Okay, raise your hand if your life has been perfect. No ups and downs, no significant events, no trauma, no challenging experiences. Yeah, I'll wait. If we were in a room full of people, I'm pretty sure that we could all look around and not see a single hand up, right? Because life is filled with challenging experiences, and the mass majority of people live with the thought process of when things are good, something terrible is probably right around the corner, right? We've all done it. We've all uttered the words, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know, life is so good, and yet I know that it's going to shift and change. That's why I thought we should really have a conversation about daily resiliency. You know, this is a serious act of self-love, and really it's a beautiful practice that helps us really take ownership of our lives in a way that we've never really done before. So let's get right to it. When I say the word resilient or resiliency, what happens in the mind for the mass majority of people is that they jump immediately to life-changing situations. So the death of a loved one, a medical crisis, a financial situation, the ending of a significant relationship, or, as we all know, the global crisis of COVID-19, right? It's really these massive events that genuinely shake up our lives and ask us to rise to a different level of ourselves. For many, when these things happen, when storms roll into our lives, we tend to go into fight or flight, or we tend to jump immediately to the word trauma. Now, before I explain why we leap, I want to give you a new definition of trauma. And if you've listened to this podcast, or you are a part of my women's circle, or you watch me on Instagram, you've heard me talk about this, but I can't talk about resiliency without bringing this up. So, for so long, we believed that trauma was one big event, some activation that maybe shocked us. So again, like I just said, it's the car accident, the job loss, the death experience. But now we have a new definition. We now understand that trauma is not the event itself, right? It's not the activation. It's the way we connect to the event. Trauma is anything, for any reason, that overwhelms our emotional and mental system. I like to say it's not so much about what happens to you as it is what is happening through you. You know, how are we connecting? And once we have a trauma experience, we impact our nervous system on every cellular level of our body. And frankly, that can be very scary, right? It's that shock to the system. And once we experience this, our brain creates a pattern that says that these moments are not safe. Hence why when life is good, we're always on the lookout for anything that could destroy or change those feelings. This is big because if we are always on the hunt for negatives, isn't it likely that it's really simple to fall into patterns of negative thoughts and negative feelings and negative experiences? The answer is yes. Of course, it's easier whenever we're looking for things that are going to make us unsafe. This is why we must build mindful daily resiliency that helps us thrive even if we are dispositioned to look for the threats or to keep ourselves safe from those big, hard moments or those shocks to our system, right? So I want to take something off the table right now. Resiliency is a behavior. It is not a trait. Right? I talked about this before on the podcast, and I just want to drive that home one more time. This is a behavior, and it is not something that we're necessarily born with. We gain resiliency throughout our lives. Yes, some people are actually more resilient than others, but really that comes down to their thinking patterns, their daily practices, and how they actually relate to their experiences. So the good news is that any of us can really begin to build resiliency, to be more resilient at any time, at any age, at any turn of life, right? So that should make you feel better. It should make you feel like you are in control of your responses, in control of the way that you show up when things are not so great. And if we just take one more thought with the idea of the brain's job being to keep you safe, I want you to kind of put this in your mindset, put it in your thinking, even visualize it if it helps you. But with the brain's job keeping the body safe, I want you to think of the brain as the body's supercomputer. And every time that it is on the lookout for negative experiences or the other shoe to drop, it's sort of your Norton antivirus, right? It really is trying to help you thrive in situations that you may not necessarily thrive in. So let's talk a little bit about how we can do that. How can we get the supercomputer, the brain, to really focus and use our resiliency to our benefit? We start with what is resiliency in the first place, right? It's our ability to quickly recover from any difficulties. There are other words that we can use in place of the word resiliency, and those words are flexibility, strength, sturdiness, and even toughness. With the brain being the body's supercomputer, I want you to think about resiliency as its inner battery. So think about what happens when you feel like you're charged up, right? When your battery is charged, you feel great. There's a sturdiness about you. You have more energy. You make quality decisions. You're more flexible, and you're able to be more present moment aware. But when your battery is low, what happens? We tend to use words like stuck or dysregulated, or we're struggling, or we're having a hard time making decisions, or we can't move forward. Resiliency is and can always be a mindful practice of recharging our battery so that our supercomputer is working in our favor. You know, the key word in all of that is the word practice. In order to build anything, we have to make it a thought process, right? We have to get the supercomputer geared towards it. And then we have to have an emotional anchor, which means that we have an emotional connection to the moment. Remember how I told you that trauma isn't necessarily the event, it's how we connect to it. That goes for anything. That's how habits are made. It's how memories are made. And from there, we actually have to have an action habit. We're going to break all of that down as we move through this time together, so don't worry. For just a moment, I want to talk about the lifespan of a thought that tells us that building our daily resiliency can not only help us in the current moment, but can help us in the long term when we do face those storms, when we do have that shocking event. So I want you to think about it. A thought comes in, I am broken. How many of us have told ourselves that, right? I know a lot of people tell themselves that they are broken or that they are the problem, that they're never going to be worthy. So I want to use the statement though, I am broken. As the thought comes in, there's really nothing to it. Our emotional body rises, which offers us a feeling that then matches that thought. So perhaps it's sadness or grief or upset. And from there, we take action. Action can just be another thought. Yeah, I am broken. And then we start this pattern all over again. And then what happens is that internal battery that we were just talking about, it drops, right? It moves into the yellow. There's just not much left. You're probably asking then, if that drains us, how do we get ourselves out of the yellow and back into the recharged battery, into the green phase? We're ready to go, right? And that is done by looking at three things and then adding practices that go with it. I'm going to hand all of those to you now, right? So the first thing that we need in order to build resilience in our lives, to create this mindful practice, is to look at our patterns. I'm going to admit a lot of people hate doing this. It's not something that's easy, right? Because we have to really look at our mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and even sometimes financial patterns. So that's the first thing, is to look at the patterns. The second is that we take a look at our habits and our disciplines. So the way that we're showing up. And the third thing is what we do with, or what we create from, the awarenesses of the first two. Right? The patterns and the way that we're showing up. And it's here that we begin to talk about plans, intentions, actions, goals, all of those things, right? So what can we do that are actual practices that we're using these three elements? The first thing that I tell anyone that I work with when we're talking about resiliency and building our ability to thrive anytime something comes in is to put resiliency in our calendar. That may sound a little strange, so let me explain. There really is no way to find patterns in your life if you're unwilling to look at them, right? Our patterns say so much about us. And when I'm talking about patterns, I'm talking about how we think, what we feel on a day-to-day basis, what we do, how we spend our money, how we show up, how we take care of our bodies, our spiritual practices. This is really this full scope idea of what do I do, how do I do it, and why do I do it? This is the kind of work that we have to do right here. And if you're feeling a little, scared, unwilling, maybe is a better word, I want you to stop for just a moment, because you actually look for patterns every single day. You're wired in your brain, in your supercomputer, to look for patterns. It's how we receive information. It's how we connect the dots. But when you are in those times that are good, like I just said a few minutes ago, and you say, oh, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, or when will something change? This is actually looking and speaking in patterns, right? We're using the past as a way to know that things are absolutely going to change in our lives because we see it, we experience it. We know that we're going to climb to the top of the mountain, look around, and then all of a sudden we're going to find ourselves in the valley. And then we're going to do the work, we're going to do the growth work, and we're going to climb back up to the top and hope that we don't fall to the valley again. And generally we do. But if we're practicing resiliency, the bottom doesn't feel so far, right? So here we're going to talk about putting resiliency on our calendar. One of my absolute top 10 favorite quotes that I personally live by is by the late Stephen Covey, who said, "Don't prioritize your schedule, schedule your priorities." To look for patterns, I want you to begin to make a schedule of it, right? Make the practice a priority. It's so necessary. It's so needed. I love to do this by scheduling mindful stops or times to recharge your battery. If that feels better to you, I use mindful stops in my personal life. But what I suggest is that you do this in the natural blocks of your day. So during your morning routine, your lunchtime hour, and your bedtime. That's sort of how we all divide our day. These 3 fundamental gaps and stops. So what I want you to do here is begin to look at your day-to-day experience. What's working and what isn't. That may mean that you have to look at your thought process. I feel great today. Wonderful. That's working for me. Or I really feel terrible. That's not working for you. The first thought, I feel great, helps to recharge your resiliency. The second one works to drain it. I want you to think about this. When something unpleasant comes into your awareness, but you're already feeling good, you don't get as shaken by that moment, right? Think about that in your daily experiences. Or perhaps the opposite is true for you. Your thoughts are heavy, you're not feeling good, and then something happens, and it may be even really minor, but that moment completely dysregulates you. It completely drains you. You go into the yellow in your supercomputer battery, and that is it. The same thing goes for your emotions. We do this financially, we do this physically, we do this with our spiritual practices. But when we are stressed, we tend to engage even deeper into pessimism, into self-sabotaging behaviors, which of course are going to drive our negative experiences even higher, which makes our brain look for more safety. There's so many pieces that are put together in this moment. But if we are looking at situations and we break them down to just kind of the bare minimum, to the facts, we don't become as overwhelmed, and we can actually use our resiliency to our benefit. So I want to break down that process really quickly on how to reframe a situation so that we can begin to use the patterns to our benefit. So let's talk about that. Reframing a situation is really, really simple. It's just a few steps. So the first thing that you do is you're going to look at the situation that is causing you stress. Do your best to narrow it down to just one element and name it. So naming it would be, I'm stressed because I have too much on my schedule, or I'm stressed because I may lose my job. And then I want you to ask yourself, what about this situation is actually stressing me out? Well, too much on my plate because I feel like I have overscheduled myself and I don't want to say no to anyone, or I am really worried about how I'm going to get another job, right? So get down to just facts. In this, you may actually find yourself using words like, I feel. And if you know that you're using the words I feel, you're actually not breaking it down into the facts, because feelings are not facts. That's a big thing. I'm going to repeat that again. Feelings are not facts. So I want you to get down to just the facts. And the facts here would be anything truthful and anything that you could actually prove with evidence. And anytime you break anything down to facts, remember that there is a rhythm to it. So this happened, and then this happened, and then this occurred. No, I feel, I think, just firm, concrete facts. If you are checking in, getting down to the facts, you're going to actually be able to clue in to what is happening in the present moment and clean it up if you need to. And you can ask yourself, are my feelings true? Or if they're not, you can meet yourself with a different thought. What's also so beautiful about this is you're going to be able to pick up on patterns of behavior, of the things that you feel, the way you behave, all of that, right? Because it's going to be right before you. I did this, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then this occurred. That is a pattern. There's also something important to mention, and when we're talking about building daily resiliency and we're breaking this into blocks and we're looking at what's working for us and what's not, We can actually use our little missteps or our mistakes that happen during the day, large or small, to help really guide ourselves as well. So often when I speak with women, we have this really crazy ability to beat ourselves up over the smallest things. And I always believe that, yes, there is an underlying issue to that, whether that is a past trauma or our self-talk or a lack of mindfulness or even a lack of awareness. But below that, even below all of those things, there is a lack of resiliency, and that is a major problem. It can take us out of balance and really lead us into all of those negative self aspects. Ironically, the very moment that you feel yourself, not doing your best, or you're exhausted, or you're using the word stuck, or you're struggling, or you're beating yourself up for a small mistake, leaning into negative thoughts, that is the exact moment that you should be practicing resiliency, right? So when you lose your cool, or you snap at someone, or you start emotionally eating, or you find yourself spiraling, I want you to stop and choose the opposite. The opposite is the practice of shifting into recharging the resiliency battery. When we are mindfully aware and we are taking short stops in our day, we are able to work through moments in real time. We don't allow things to linger. We don't stuff them down. We don't allow things to ruminate for 3 days or a week or a month or even a year. And we don't tell our brain that those things that we're experiencing are unsafe or negative. And that's what's so important. The more we practice something, the more we tell our brain that this is our pattern. The deal is, once we tell the supercomputer that this is our pattern, it's hard to change it. It's not impossible, but it takes quite a bit of work. So as I said, I want you to really schedule resilience building, those 3 blocks where you're stopping, you're witnessing how you feel, you're witnessing what's working for you, what's not, and you're meeting it with just facts. You're breaking it down and you're choosing the opposite of whatever is not working for you. This is really how we allow the brain to know I can handle my moments. I can handle any event that's happening around me or through me. Now let's move to item number 2, where we are building resiliency by looking at our habits and our disciplines, right? So this is how we show up in our life. Sadly, most people live on autopilot. So many people do this. They don't even realize it. They just really are getting up in the morning. They're meeting their needs. They're caring for their family. They're doing whatever they have to just get through the day. But what most people do not realize is that the way you show up, those habits and disciplines that you have in the day-to-day greatly, and I mean greatly, impacts the way that you will handle big moments. This is probably going to seem counterintuitive at first, but as you are looking at your habits, when you're looking at your behaviors, I want you to really challenge yourself to think about what the opposite of that behavior is. What do I mean? I mean, if you're one who keeps to yourself and loneliness is an issue for you, then building daily resiliency would look like going out and engaging with other people, right? Did you just shudder? A lot of people cannot stand that thought, but it is how we meet ourselves in building that resiliency. We could even really challenge ourselves to join a new club of like-minded people. Maybe you love to cook, so you would go out and find a cooking class. Maybe you find yourself constantly downgrading how you feel about yourself, the negative self-talk, but your health isn't a priority. Maybe you do the opposite of coming home and sitting on the couch and mindlessly eating, and instead you go for a walk or you take your bike out for a spin right after your meal. Our habits, again, are very much an indicator of how we're going to handle things in bigger moments. Think about what happens if you already have a support system in place and something bad happens. or that you have a physical activity that you love when there is an emotional shock. You can go out there and go for the run because you know that it's going to make you feel better. So what are you doing in your day to day? For that person that's shy, building a community is going to give them mental, emotional, and physical support that would not be there if they kept to themselves. If we live on autopilot, those big moments, like I talked about, the job loss, illness, a death, anything that disrupts us is going to really shock us. It's going to rock us to our core, and we are absolutely going to struggle to deal with it. But if we're building mindfully and we're constantly taking ourselves into a better direction, a better thought process, a better feeling process, we are telling the supercomputer that we can handle anything that comes. What we're doing is we're building a pattern of behaviors that allows our battery to stay charged even in hard moments. So important. Your daily activities matter more than you think. Now let's move to the third element, and that is action. Resiliency is built in the movements, in our choices. Now that may feel very similar to our habits. But in our second step, what we're really doing here is really assessing what we do. Here, we're shifting into the action of doing. When we stop, correct, and are in full ownership of our emotions and our mental wellness, there's a natural thought process that occurs, and that is to make each action in each day have meaning. When we use this filter in our lives, we take action through clear intention. We become proactive in our lives instead of reactive. When we do not have a baseline of resiliency, we are reactive to moments. When we have the baseline, we are proactive because we've already told the brain, the supercomputer, we've got this, right? Do you see how important this is? Resiliency also means that we are creating new patterns, new actions that with time and practice, they become our sustainable actions. Now, I want to give you a few of those supporting actions that help us build daily resiliency without us even having to focus on it, without us getting into the time blocks of scheduling it, because this becomes our natural way of life. So I'm going to give you a handful of those. And the first one is learning to recognize your signs of stress. If we have a baseline to understand our patterns, again, we're going back to that patterns, and we get into a place where we're asking ourselves, is this the fact? Am I stuck? Am I in a place where I can't handle anything? What happens is we remove the stress response and we build resiliency. So get into a space where you're really checked in. You are really engaging with your emotional body. This does take practice. It does take time to develop. But if you get into a place where you become aware of what's happening within you, you're able to quickly snap out of it and change directions. What is that? That's resiliency. All right. Number 2 is to focus on building your physical health. What kind of changes can you invest in to improve your health? Like we were just talking about a few seconds ago is the habit. What can you do to really support yourself so that you can handle the hard moments? You maybe need to focus on sleep or better nutrition or better hydration, exercise. Those are just a few examples, right? Create a list of small changes and then be proactive in your action. The third one is to strengthen the relaxation response within your body. Remember, a calm body equals a calm mind, and vice versa. Maybe think about some new relaxation skills. I'm not talking about bougie appointments at the nail salon. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about true relaxation techniques. Maybe it's breathing exercises. I'm going to offer you one in just a moment. Maybe it's meditation. You can go to Insight Timer. I have meditations there. There's also the ones here on the podcast. You can go to Calm or Headspace. Those are great apps to help you as well. Maybe it's listening to soothing music or going out for a run. Maybe that's your sense of relaxation. It doesn't matter, but you need to put some in practice so that you can get the supercomputer to recognize the body doesn't need to be in autopilot or in fight or flight all the time. That stress response really does drain that internal battery. And for all of you that love chocolate, you can even eat a small amount of dark chocolate every day, as that's a really great way to reground yourself and to bring yourself into center. That could be your activity if you want, not too much, right? But have some, because that does actually help us get into a space where we're telling the brain, hey, I'm going to have a little break and physically relax here. And that could be your relaxation method. You can also increase your positive emotions on a daily basis. It's really important to identify what makes you happy. What brings you joy? What actually creates this laughter effect in your life? And from there, express gratitude for it. Get into a place where you have maybe a list of accomplishments or a list of the things that you know make you feel really good, and then engage in them. The fifth thing is to engage in mindful activities. Notice what happens in your day as you're doing that block exercise that works for you. And then look at what doesn't. And just like I said before, meet the moment with the opposite if it doesn't work for you. I know that if I don't get up in the morning and do my morning routine of meditation and journaling and taking some time for myself, I know I don't feel as good throughout the day. So what are your mindful activities? And then you could even ask yourself at the end of your block, at the end of your day, what did I do today that made me feel connected with myself? That is a mindfulness question. Identify those activities that put you in the flow, which means that you were present moment. You were enjoying what happened right then in front of you, or even those things that make you lose track of time. I know I can do that when I'm meditating, or I'm out for a run, or I'm just sitting and having a great conversation. And the last one, before we get into the breathing exercise, I want you to counter unhelpful thinking. This goes back to looking for the patterns. So I want you to write down what you're thinking when you find yourself stressed, or you find yourself really trashing your worth with your self-talk. And if you need to play devil's advocate, which, I don't really love, but if you need to, I want you to ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? And after you have the answer, ask yourself, could I survive that? Remember that the worst thing that could happen rarely actually happens. And then when you have your answer, I want you to ask yourself the next question, because this is going to really up-level that battery for you, is what is the best thing that could happen? And what would I tell a friend if they brought the situation to me? The other piece to this is, if you can't stop thinking about something, I want you to sit with your thoughts for about 20 to 30 minutes, and I want you to write down everything that comes to mind. This is the brain dump exercise that I've mentioned before, but this is something that I absolutely love and has so much value in it, because this can help confirm exactly what is either keeping your battery full or keeping your battery drained. It's really important to see what is going on in your mindset, and this does just that. Now, let's talk about building resiliency through something that is free and available to you every second of the day for as long as you are alive. It is your breath. When we are stressed, when we have an emotional shock, when life pulls the rug out from under you, when you are in a cycle where that battery is low and the brain is looking for every single safety aspect, the best thing that you can do is to get yourself back into coherence. Coherence is the alignment between the heart, mind, emotion, and physical systems of the body. Okay? How can we do that? We use the breath. Remember, it is the natural way to take our nervous system and bring it back into balance. As I began to think about which breathing exercise that I wanted to teach you today, I thought about the fact that I love the HeartMath breathing coherence exercise. As a HeartMath practitioner, I really want to teach you that because I believe it has so much great value. But then I want to teach you sort of the step 2 to that exercise, and it is called the shift and lift technique. Again, both are extremely simple. They calm the nervous system, and it does help you get into a space that you are building resiliency because you are telling the brain, anytime I feel dysregulated, anytime there's a shock to the system, anytime I'm not feeling my best, I'm going to engage the breath and I'm going to bring myself back to calm. That is resiliency in and of itself. So I invite you to do this practice with me right now. Again, it's very simple. If you're driving, don't do it. Wait, earmark where you are in the podcast right now and then try it later. So sit straight up and make sure that both of your feet are firmly planted on the ground. If you need to, scoot to the edge of your seat so that you can actually be very comfortable while you're doing this. This isn't a rigid exercise, so let go of that. In fact, I want you to sort of shake out the shoulders, the arms, and kind of just get into a place that you're comfortable. You're straight up, you're not reclined, but you're not rigid either. And I want you to focus your attention on the area of your heart, so your chest. If it's helpful, you can place your hand over your heart and imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of where your hand is or your heart space. Try breathing a little slower and deeper than usual while keeping your attention on the flow of breath in and out of the heart. We want controlled, mindful breathing. If you are having trouble visualizing your breath going in and out of your heart space, a really beautiful trick is to turn your breath into your favorite color. Envision that breath is now a ribbon in that beautiful color that you've chosen. And I want you to inhale the ribbon in and out of your heart, right? Like it's in, pull, out, release. Do this until you feel yourself really calm again. Your shoulders are not pinched. They're not up, against your ears, and your mind surrenders any stress, negativity, or unwanted reactions. And once you're there, we can shift into the shift and lift technique. With that breathing still happening through the center of the heart space, we can activate our feelings. Here, we want to bring forth any feelings of gratitude, kindness, appreciation, deeply listening to what's happening within us in a very positive way. If you have trouble doing this, and in the beginning, you might, so do not get down on yourself. I want you to shift the thought into the appreciation of someone you love or care about. And this can even be a pet or an event. It doesn't matter, but shift to something outside of yourself if the internal makes you feel uncomfortable or makes you feel like your mind is going to wander away into something else. Keep breathing and allow this to lift your energy and restore your mind, heart, and body alignment. The third step is to slowly return to your normal breathing and allow your thoughts to settle on one great thing in your life right now, today. What is one thing that is really working in your favor? Remember, resiliency is built in our day-to-day habits. So what is that one thing for you? these two exercises are always available to you because breathing is always available to you. And the more you practice these techniques, the more the supercomputer and the body will earmark them as your go-to reaction when hard things occur. Even when there are massive events that you did not plan on, when those shocks come, if you've been practicing this and building your daily resiliency, the brain will say, what do we need right now? Oh, we need to use our breath. It will be automatic. Okay. So you have to do it when you don't really need it so that you can have it when you do. When you use your mind, your heart, and your body in a mindful way, you build what you need. We move ourselves into a space where we no longer feel like we need to be saved, that we're stuck, that we have no way out, because we know without any doubt, with exact certainty, that we can get through anything, that we have the power to do whatever it is that we need. In the beginning, I asked you to raise your hand if your life had been perfect. And again, I would say if we were in a big auditorium, not a single hand would go up. But now I ask you to raise your hand if you feel like you have a new understanding of how you can begin to mindfully own your life. I hope that you realize that resiliency is already within you. You are already resilient, but you need to spend some time building a baseline of resiliency. This is how we thrive. This is how we win in our life. And without it, it's very hard to get to inner peace and self-love. The act of daily resiliency is an essential step into getting our life together. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life, please share this episode with someone that you love. If you're seeking daily inspiration and additional tools and tips, you can follow me on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can also visit the show notes, my blog, or the Women's Circle on the GetYourLifeTogetherGirl.com website. Thank you for being a valuable member of this community. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.